thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Shayna. I'm the Communications Director for Alexis for Nevada, and I'm so excited to have everyone here. And thank you again, truly, to the Teamsters Local 14 for hosting us again here. We really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that all of you have come out tonight. As I start, before we begin, let me start with our land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional homelands of the Nwungo Southern Paiute people, and they have stewarded this land for generations. So we are grateful to be here and hope to continue the process of learning and listening about what that means. We're here, this is our third data center town hall, because I would say in every room in every county we've been in, it is among the top 2 or 3 questions that people have brought to us. And so it's something we have done a lot of listening and learning about on our own, in addition to, I will say, I just said this to someone else, I live in Reno. Every time I drive from my house to Alexis's house, I drive past what is becoming the Keystone Data Center. And for months, it just looked like, oh, what a weird place in the middle of town between a bunch of different shopping centers to build some new condos, but I guess it's kind of close to the river. And there was no sign on the fence, and then it got taller, and I was like, what a weird condo building to have no windows. And then they finally put a sign on the gate that said, this is the Keystone Data Center. And I think that's the point at which a lot of people in Reno became aware that there was, in fact, a data center being built smack in the middle of Northwest Reno. If you haven't heard, last night there was a big vote in the Reno City Council, voted 6-1 to extend a temporary or pause a moratorium on new development until August of 2027. We had a previous town hall in Reno. We also had one here in Boulder City, was anyone here at the one in Boulder City? Joseph was, I know, and Alexis, obviously, and a couple of other folks. So thank you for coming back out, because I know this is a busy time. It is a hot week. There's an election a week from today, and there are a lot of issues on people's minds, but this is the kind of issue that has clearly galvanized people across the country and across the state for sure. And Alexis has convened these previous conversations among experts, not all of whom agreed necessarily about what was the right mechanism or what was the right way to go. We've had a lot of speakers at both of those previous town halls who talked about they work in building trades and how is this going to impact their job if we stop this new construction. So we've heard a lot of perspectives. We've had amazing folks who have been working on water issues from a tribal perspective for generations who have joined us, and other community organizers. And so it's, we've seen some progress, and we've seen a lot of movement happen across the country. So Alexis is going to talk about her policy plan. Joseph, who was actually on our Boulder City panel before he joined the campaign, he's working with us now, but he's also a resident of Boulder City who's been working closely with those folks. And Chris, who I just met, who is wonderful. Thank you, Chris Halpin, who is probably knows more about data centers and how electricity works than almost everyone in this room combined. I don't know. Maybe there's some other experts out there. Please tell us if you are. And has joined us on behalf of the Sierra Club. So thank you to everyone. We're going to hear from different folks and hear a little bit more, and then we're going to take questions. And if we have time after we talk about data center and you want to ask questions about other stuff, we'll take those too. Yeah, okay, so our first speaker is a resident of Boulder City. He has real concerns. Joseph, take it away. Tell us about what's happening in Boulder City.
All right, hello everybody. I have prepared remarks, so if I look down, just go with me, okay? All right, I love Boulder City. It is a unique community. We're not Las Vegas, we're not an industrial zone. We're a small town with big city amenity and a strong identity and a very rich history and a quality of life that generations have worked to protect. We're coming up on 100 years in about 5 years, I want to say, give or take. So we're still fairly new, right? When residents learned about the proposed town site Solar 2 data center, we came together. Neighbors attended meetings, we organized town halls, signed petitions, and spoke out because we believe decisions that impact our future should be made with the community, not for the community. The Planning Commission listened, so that's a victory. After hours of public testimony, they voted to reject the proposed data center. That victory belongs to the people of Boulder City who showed up and made their voices heard. This isn't about being anti-technology. It's about asking tough questions before giving away our resources and changing our communities forever. Residents raise concern about water, energy demand, environmental impacts, and whether the benefits justified the costs. What happened in Boulder City should be a lesson for all Nevada. Communities deserve transparency, they deserve a seat at the table, and they deserve leaders who put residents ahead of special interests. Tonight, I am proud to stand with Nevadans who believe growth should work for our communities and not happen at our community's expense. My fellow Boulder citizens and I prove that when residents organize and speak with one voice, we can shape our future. Now is the time to make that a Nevada victory across the state. My message for you tonight is to hold your elected officials accountable. I love you, but I will be. Hold our elected officials accountable, come together as a community. I support Alexis Hill for governor because she is talking about the issues and proposing solutions. She went to Boulder City multiple times to meet with us, listen, and that is a glimpse of the kind of governor she will be. And to that note, I also jokingly say, I live in Boulder City and she's there more than me. She has never forgotten a small town. She has never forgotten a constituent. I have seen her walk into very large rooms and know everyone face to face. I want you all to know you matter to Alexis. So with that, I yield to Shana.
Thank you, Joseph. Chris is here to tell us a little bit more about himself and his experience, and then share some of the perspective of the Sierra Club, we just talked to folks from the Sierra Club in the Toya Beach chapter outside of the Reno City Hall proceedings yesterday, and it was amazing to see how much the Sierra Club has been involved up there. But tell us more about yourself and what's happening in Southern Nevada.
Sure. So, you can hear me? Okay, good. Sometimes I don't even need a microphone. My wife will confirm that for you. So anyway, Chris Halpin, I am a registered professional engineer. I have been doing work here in Nevada for about 20 years. I've been in the energy efficiency industry for 41 years, including being a global energy manager for NCR Corp 25 years ago, back when you may remember ATM machines and cash registers were popular then. And we also had data centers all around the world. And before that, I did some data center efficiency work for IBM, and I've done this for U.S. Department of Energy, Sandia, and Los Alamos National Laboratories, and a few other places, including Clark County Schools, City of Reno, City of Henderson, helping them all do energy efficiency projects. Right? And so, for me, this topic is very important because, you know, the electrical load anywhere in this country increases by maybe 1% per year, right? Data centers are changing that, and a step function like 10, 15, 20% increase in electric load in a local grid in a short period of time. And the grid isn't really ready for all that. So what I'm recommending, and Sierra Club is recommending, is responsible, smart development, right? Some of you may have heard of this little team we have here called the Golden Knights, right? I think we're playing tonight in the Stanley Cup Finals, right? And so not $1 of taxpayer money went to the Golden Knights to start that team. And meanwhile, we've given $1.5 billion to the Raiders and the A's for these other two stadiums. That money could have been used, I think, and this is my personal opinion at Sierra Club, but for students and healthcare and everything here in this state, which really needs it, right? And we have the highest unemployment rate still in the country. So building anything like this of scale creates jobs, right? I have friends here at Teamsters, at IBEW. I grew up in a union family in New York, and I think it's important that we, you know, work with the developers and the owners, right? Sometimes you have developers who develop these things on spec. Like, you live around here, all the warehouses that have been built up past the Speedway, it's mind-boggling, right? There's like almost no public input on any of that, right? Not one of them have solar panels on the roof because they built them so cheap, they don't have the structural integrity to put solar panels on, right? That should not be allowed. Right, so I have a whole list of things here that Sierra Club recommends, but what I'm hoping to do here, at least, give you a little bit of knowledge about how these data centers work, but talk to folks about how to do this in a way that your public has input and what's going to go into this now. And I have a whole bunch of technical stuff around this, but it's honestly pretty boring. But it's all about, you know, if we're gonna build something, don't build it right next to homes, right? Don't build it next to schools, don't build it, just like when you're gonna do it's industry, cannabis, whatever it is, you need to be smart about how you locate something, right? And making sure that the electric grid, the water in the area, the environmental things, the noise, everything needs to be measured ahead of time. And then the systems need to be planned and designed so that they meet criteria that the city council or the county, whatever, sets with public input, right? Because as you've seen elsewhere, here and other places, things just get built and no one knows about it until the steel's up and it's halfway done and there's nothing that can be done about it. It gets done kind of in the dark. So what we're recommending through Sierra Club and I mean personally is that ordinances get put in place, just like the vote in Reno yesterday. It would be nice to have something like that done here in Vegas, North Las Vegas, and Clark County, right? 'Cause that's the biggest opportunity is Clark County because there's the most land in the area, and Henderson as well, of course. So, but do things around zoning and siting, land use, right? Noise, right? These things are extremely noisy. There's a little tiny town in Kentucky that had one of these put in, and they just like kind of paid everybody off in the area, and it came up to be louder than anything else in that town, including factories. Right? So it was right next to a residential neighborhood. So there's things like that that I think are super important. We also believe that they should bring their own energy, right? The grid here just is not set up to be able to take a 20 megawatt, 100 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt. Right? You may have heard of the term gigawatt. That's 1,000 megawatts. It's huge, and that puts a huge stress on the grid. So, like my belief is they bring their own solar, their own battery storage, no natural gas, right? Because that's just going to continue to increase the heating effect here, right? So, Las Vegas is the second fastest heating city in the country, surpassed only by Reno, right? And we have a pretty high baseline here, as you know, because we live here. So, making sure they bring their own power, get really credible water rights for anything they're going to do, and require that everything they do be super water efficient and super energy efficient. There's technologies out there now, and I was involved in the development of a report for these national labs. There's technologies called immersive cooling, where you basically take all the computer boards, you put them in a tank, like a big, huge Yeti cooler, twice the size of this, with oil in it, right? It's a highly specialized oil, and you don't need to use water. The heat goes into the oil gets transferred through the heat off to water, and you don't have all this evaporation happening. Like we've seen here at SNWA, now it doesn't allow evaporative cooling for a very good reason, right? It uses billions of gallons of water a year around here. So, water is important, energy is important, noise is important. I was just saying to Sheena, this Keystone data center, before it finishes, somebody should be going out there doing sound testing now. What's the ambient decibel level now? And then do that and have them tell you what it's supposed to be and then what it actually is, right? I oversee big corporations for government agencies that do efficiency projects like this. And we always want to make sure testing gets done ahead of time, and then there's really tight restrictions or metrics put in place so that they have to meet those. And if they don't meet them, they pay huge penalties. We also believe they should make developers pay all project-driven infrastructure and added fire service costs, right? That is huge. We don't even do that for factories or warehouses now. They just pay minimal fees and just get to use everything, including all the roads. A whole bunch of things in here, impact fees. Anything they're doing should be paying an impact fee. And I'm glad it made it into this. My personal feeling and Sierra Club's is that they, for places that are larger than 20 megawatts, these are the really big ones, they should be putting a fund in place to pay to upgrade the homes and businesses in the local area to make them more energy and more efficient, right? And make them better places to live, work, heal, teach, everything in the local community. And any buildings they build should be what we consider green built, leadership in energy environmental design. at least gold or platinum. So that is a certification, third-party certification, that they're not doing what we call greenwashing. You know, like what happens a lot in government is they tell you everything you want, and then it doesn't really always happen, right? This happens in commerce all the time. Just like those cheap radar tickets everyone was gonna get, right? Or the World Cup tickets, don't get me started. So anyway, that's sort of my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions at the end.
We are going to take questions after Alexis shares a little bit more about her thoughts on what we can do if we have some actual political will to get it done.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming out. It's so great to see you all. I know there are new friends in the room, so thank you for coming to get to know me and hopefully ask me some hard questions tonight. And like Shayna said, it doesn't have to all be about data centers, but we typically dig into healthcare and education and housing during these town halls as well. So feel free to ask any of your burning questions. But I am a county commissioner and trying to govern on a local level, and I am constantly so frustrated because the state does not provide the resources or the guidance or the oversight or the support that we need to be successful. And data centers are emblematic of that, because right now as a county, if a data center came in, we would permit it as a warehouse. It is not a warehouse. That is the zoning it falls in, so we have no special siting criteria, no regulations that we can say, no, this is not in the right zoning area, and really proving the case on noise unless the state backs you up, it's really tough as a local government to do on your own. And we need state guidance on these things. So in 2015, the legislature decided we've got to get big business to come into Nevada because we need to diversify. And I think, I'm not going to fault motive here, because if you all remember, we were still climbing out of the Great Recession during that time. We needed to get diversification in our communities. But the way that we went about it, I think, especially in where data centers are now with AI, we need to re-examine it. So in that time, the legislature actually put statutory, so in law, requirements that we have to give away up to 75% tax abatements to data centers. Anywhere for a decade to 20 years, it's estimated by the Nevada Independent that over $500 million of our taxpayer money went out the door and was not invested in our schools, in our local governments, in our roads, in our healthcare, et cetera, because it went to subsidize data centers alone. That's just one industry that we chose to put in statutory requirements for. And because of that, and you'll hear the Governor's Office of Economic Development say this, their hands are tied. So if it meets certain criteria, they have to give away the incentive. And so we have got to make sure there's more transparency when we're looking at economic development in this state, and that we actually know what how data centers are impacting our state today, and doing more analysis on whether they really are diversifying our communities. And I'm the only candidate for governor who actually wants to regulate these things. And it's because they're big money. Switch is a big company in town, and they hold a lot of sway, and that's just one of many data center companies who are supporting my opponents. And I think that there is this worry, and I think we should talk about it, about how are we going to ensure that the building and construction trades can be saved during this time. Because right now, we're seeing an economic downturn. We're seeing that things are not being built. And we know that data centers, they do support union labor for building them. So there is a divide, especially in the Democratic Party, about what to do about data centers. But I would argue, in the same way that Chris said this, we should be investing in Nevadans and not companies who don't need the subsidy. AI is doing just fine. the state of Nevada should not be offsetting their impacts to our local communities with these tax breaks. And this is just failure on the state level to really address these major concerns. And so what I would like to do, just to give you an idea of what my platform for data centers would be, after talking to a lot of experts, after talking to the Sierra Club and other really engaged community members who have been researching this issue, and looking at what other states are doing, Virginia almost didn't pass their state budget because of a data center fight. Because that governor ran on making sure that they'd be regulating data centers, because that is such a hot topic in our elections today, because they cover both the fear of AI and automation, it's taking away jobs. And just talk to the Teamsters, that where we're at today, they had a bill where it would require that any commercial vehicle would have a human in it for safety. And that bill did not get through the legislature, didn't even get out of committee, because we have lawmakers who are not wanting to slow down or stop the progression of automation, which is taking away jobs in our state. We should actually be incentivizing companies to hire people and pay them a living wage. And so these are the policy solutions that I've worked on with community members. I want to hear your questions on these. And then I want to talk about my economic impact plan for Nevada and how I want to invest in Nevadans today. Because we also need to talk about, okay, if we're not going to be investing in data centers, because we know they're big job creators to construct data centers, but long-term it's anywhere from 10 people to 20 people that are actually operating these things. And is that the kind of jobs that we think that these subsidies should be paying for? The first executive order on day one is that we will stop any new tax abatements for data centers. It's crazy that we do it today, and these things are going to continue to try to come into our state, and we need to make sure that they're paying their fair share. I also want to review the impact through executive order on our water and energy and economic impact to our communities, so we have a transparent report that we can provide to taxpayers saying what the payoff is. And I don't think it's that great, because the Nevada Independent couldn't even get solid job numbers from the Governor's Office of Economic Development when they were doing this study on data centers, because there's no accountability. No one is watching the candy shop, and we are all suffering because of it. Through the legislature, I want to pass bills this next session to require a state permitting process and regional oversight over zoning and siting to give local governments more a cover and guidance when permitting data centers, because I have been told in many rooms that you talk about data centers and segment them out as a different usage, they're going to go after local communities and potentially win lawsuits saying that there's discriminatory behavior. So having state guidance and support will really support our local communities and allowing them to know how they can properly regulate data centers. I also want to ban evaporative cooling systems. As you heard, since Southern Nevada Water Authority does not permit that, but in the rest of the state, it's a Wild West, you can do whatever you want. And so we need to make sure we're protecting all of the water resources in the state with that. And I want to see a new electric rate class for data centers, because we worry, and we don't know for sure, but because there's a real lack of transparency about how the PUC does their business and how NV Energy does their business, but the cost of data centers is being passed on to you and me with our utility costs. And so making sure that they have a different class rate and that they are paying their fair share should be essential, and something that is done immediately, especially for existing data centers. And then requiring that any new data centers that come in meet the highest renewable portfolio standard today. Right now, we require that data centers meet the portfolio standard for 2026. We have goals that we need to meet by 2030, and we are not on track to meet those, because data centers are not required to bring in their own energy, bring in their own power. And we just found out from the current that our governor has been instrumental about trying to get a natural gas pipeline to Nevada to help with data centers. And that is scary. We should be worried about any new clean energy that is not being invested in this state, because we have an abundance of clean energy in this state that we could use: solar, wind, and natural or geothermal. Thank you. And so I think that we have got to make sure that we're requiring that any new energy that comes online is not, we're not firing up coal plants to support data centers. And so why am I running? Why am I mounting a campaign to really fight the status quo in this state and bring change to this state and force these conversations? It's because no one else is doing it. No one else is standing up to billionaires and corporations and actually talking about investing in Nevadans and trying to solve the major issues of our day: homelessness, housing crisis, mental health crisis, healthcare crisis, education crisis. We don't have enough resources, and we continue to give away all of our taxpayer monies in order to, we say, diversify our economy, but we're no more diverse, and we're still struggling as a state, especially with the draconian policies of this Congress and our president. And we need a governor who has a plan for Nevada on day one. So we need more government revenues, but this is not the way to do it. I want to add 15,000 new jobs to this state, good paying jobs. And part of my plan is taxing billionaires and corporations and investing in infrastructure jobs, building our roads, expanding public transit, supporting our schools, hiring teacher aides so our teachers have the support they need in the classroom, and really investing in the future of Nevada. I grew up here, and we have always, my whole life, we have wanted the visitor or some sort of extractive economy like mining to pay for our lifestyles. And I think that for a long time it actually did work for us. Government revenues, the last time they kept up with inflation in this state was 1990. And so we continue to fall behind in all of these quality of life indicators because we're not willing to tax people who actually can pay their fair share. And I'm not talking about giving you an income tax. I'm not talking about taxing the working Nevadan. I'm talking about taxing the people who are making money off of the hard-working Nevadan and not paying their fair share. So even the companies we subsidize, like the warehousing we subsidize in this state, Amazon, Walmart, Tesla, they have some of the highest, they're the top 10 Medicaid recipients in this state because they are not paying their people even enough money to afford healthcare. There is something wrong with this picture, and we've got to stand up and speak out against it. I'm willing to take on corporations. I want to support our small businesses. They are the backbone of this state, and they need real support. And part of my economic plan is to ensure that small businesses actually are treated like the big businesses that we have been luring here for over a decade, and offsetting their taxes, giving them support for small business loans on the state level, and seeing how we can incentivize them to hire people and provide health care to Nevadans. And I want to invest in our schools. We're 48th in per pupil funding. We should be so ashamed. That is not acceptable. And all it takes is $2 billion a year to invest in our schools, so we're in the median per pupil funding. We can do it. And there is actually a roadmap that the Committee on School Funding submitted to the legislature several sessions ago that sits on a shelf and nothing has been done on it because no one is willing to take on these issues in our state. And I'm sick of it. I want to put Nevadans first, and I want to protect Nevadans. That is why I'm running, and I'm so thrilled you're here. I want to answer your questions, and we've got a whole panel here that will also answer your questions, and looking forward to connecting with you tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Yeah, how about some applause? All right, who's got questions? I'll come over with the microphone. We're recording, so let's try to make sure that we're able, for folks who weren't able to be here tonight, to hear what your questions are. I'm coming around, try not to knock over the camera, which is what I would do. Okay.
Good evening, Dr. Hill, panel. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate your time and your effort and your energy. My name is MJ Ivy. I'm a resident here in Summerlin. And my question to you as a 24-year resident here in Nevada, the numbers, Chris, that you had talked about specifically in regard to taxing. There's two questions I have for you, Governor Hill. Is it okay to call it Governor Hill? All right, thank you so much.
I love it.
Gotta get used to it.
So my question to you would be in twofold. When it comes to deregulation of this state and looking at the case studies that have been done with the conservation's permissions, they have been done. Why are we allowing the PUC to dictate what is happening, and why are we allowing one energy company to be here when we have the ability to be like Delaware, Texas, and others that have deregulated and allowed competition, which would lower costs for electricity? And then secondly, why have we not taken the Governor's Economic Development Board, put it into committees specifically to address this so that we can have a recommendation based upon using the word data and information so that we can go ahead and make real recommendations about how to tax an organization, possibly economic tax to come into, so it's on the books. We have the law, but the law does not cover the tax aspect of it that we can put on to each of these corporations. A land use tax, which Colorado uses all the time, an economic road use tax for each of these corporations so that we can recoup some of these monies and have it back in. Your thoughts?
Thank you, MJ. And MJ is also running for public administrator, just so you know, if you haven't filled out your ballot yet. I appreciate the question. I actually have been thinking a lot about this. The PUC, NV Energy, it comes up in almost all of these town halls about how worried people are about our utilities being held by one company who is there to make profit. Let's be real. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we can actually challenge NV Energy to be a better player and talk about other options that they don't want to actually invest in this state, because the way that we're doing business today is not serving us. So we can restructure our law and require that citizens who invest in rooftop solar and companies who invest in rooftop solar receive better incentives. Right now, they were just taken away, essentially, with the PUC's most recent ruling. And I will give it to the PUC. I want to be fair. I think they were trying to figure out how to make sure everyone is assessed fairly. And they were making the argument that lower income residents were subsidizing the solar of higher income residents. That's unacceptable. That needed to change. But whether or not the surge fee is actually the appropriate way to make sure people are paying their fair share is another question. And we know that the governor actually interfered on this personally by telling NV Energy to wait on that fee until after the election, which is despicable. So none of you will see that rate increase on your bill until after the election, and that's so convenient for our sitting governor because he is in cahoots with them. And so we've talked in several of these town halls about community-owned energy companies, about seeing about deregulation as well of NV Energy. And I think that it's all of these options need to be on the table because we need change in this state. And I think there's real opportunity to push NV Energy to be a better partner, and if they can't be, then we have actually a lot of tools to ensure that they are properly regulated as well. And I'm not sure if Chris has thoughts since you've been in this realm so long.
First, thank you for your service. I've done a lot of work for the military over the years, and God love you all for what you do. So I went to the first meeting in the United States about deregulation of electricity when I was living and working in Connecticut. And one of the former PUC commissioners was there, and he retired already, and he'd heard about this deregulation stuff. And he's like, there's one thing you all need to recognize here. There's three kinds of utility customers. There's commercial, there's industrial, and there's voters.
Yeah.
He didn't say residential. He said voters, right? And he was spot on, because I've been involved in regulation in multiple states, deregulation in multiple states. I was in California during the rolling blackouts in 2001 due to Enron, all kinds of other things that have gone on over the years. And it's pure deregulation, like they do in Texas. That's okay for Texas, right? But it would not work here, right? Delaware is a better model. Actually, the state of Delaware has been one of my clients for about 10 years. Multiple other states, Maryland and others. And there's a good way to do it, and it needs to be not as much deregulated as restructured, so that you don't want to end up with what we've seen in some states where they deregulated right as the price of natural gas went through the roof, like in the late 90s, right? And everyone's bills went up because now it's deregulated. And they made a lot of mistakes with stranded investments. They paid all these utilities who had nuclear plants and coal plants and that billions of dollars of stranded asset costs, right? That was never true. It never really happened that was a stranded cost. They all made so much more money after deregulation. And the prices didn't go down as much as everyone had thought. So it's a matter of timing. I'm putting the right sort of metrics in place, like I was talking about these efficiency projects. So I'm involved in another group with a few people who have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff, and we're looking at trying to get a bill in place to change how it gets done. And I understand what you're saying. If NV Energy doesn't want to play ball, there's things like the Energy Trust of Oregon and Vermont Energy Efficiency Corporation that have been done where they literally take the ratepayer money directly from the utility. The utility doesn't get to keep it, right? They still collect it on the bills. Then it gets passed through right to them, right? And you could then have a nonprofit filled into that and just want to do the right thing for the people here. And we've spoken to Energy Trust of Oregon and others about what they do. And it's a really good model. It's actually worked out to be much more profitable for the citizens than anything else that's been done in the state. Anything else that's been done in the state. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done around that topic. Just education, right? Alone. I mean, the fact that it's pretty endemic to the US in general compared to what goes on in Europe and other places where the public has all kinds of things coming at them all day long on how to buy lots of stuff they don't need on credit, but yet there's no education about how this demand charge works. There was no analysis even that they provided for that. So educating the public on these topics, I think, is crucial, because once you educate them, like we do with our children, they become much better players in the marketplace. And that alone would make this a better state from an economic point of view. Right? There's Europe after the Russians invaded Ukraine, and Germany, where my wife's from, reduced their natural gas usage by 20% in like 6 months. Right? Because that was the conviction, right? They had to do it, and they wanted to get off that gas. So that's the kind of thing that we can do here. The fact that the water levels in the lake are really low. There was no snow in Colorado. Both our sons live in Denver, and it snowed 10 times the whole winter, a little bit at a time. That's nothing. So the lake's going to go down even further this year. And we have a huge El Nino coming, right? And that's not going to make it easier. So it's becoming an existential issue for everybody that lives in the rest of the Southwest as well, but especially here. So I could want to know, but we don't know.
Well, and MJ, your second part of your question is how do we restructure the Governor's Office of Economic Development? And that's exactly what I want to do. It's working with the legislature, because these are laws that were created in 2015, unanimously approved, because we were still climbing out of the recession. But I think there's real potential. We're one of the only states in the United States that does not support small businesses as part of the economic portfolio of the state. And I don't know about you, go into your favorite small business that is owned by real people, and they're going to tell you it's hard to make it right now, and they're struggling. And we're seeing small businesses close their doors, and they're the economic engine of the state and are essential to ensuring that we have great communities. So I think that there's real opportunity to work with the legislature to restructure the way that we do business in this state and stop the giveaways. They estimate, the Committee on School Funding estimates that over $1 billion could go into our schools today. And we only need $2 billion to get to the median per pupil funding if we removed all of these subsidies that we are giving away and made people pay their fair share. That's how much money we're leaving on the table today. Think of how much better our schools would be even if they were between 48th and 25th, and how better our student outcomes would be. So I think that making sure that we do business and economic development in a transparent way, which we haven't done as a state, will be the goal of this administration as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Eva.
So nobody's looking at my back. Eva Chase. I'm running for District 16. Probably most of you aren't in my district. I'm below Harry Reid Airport. This is my question for tonight. Being a progressive Democrat, I'm also a veteran of the Air Force, I have a lot of good ideas when I get to Carson City, and my idea would be, we have the Las Vegas Aces, we have the Golden Knights, we got the Silver Knights, we got the Nighthawks, we got the Raiders, we're going to have the A's in a couple of years. These organizations can pay big salaries to athletes. Why can't these sports teams pay more business taxes? And I work at a prominent casino. I'm not going to say the name, I get in trouble. But what about the sales tax? What about this tourist tax? People coming to visit. Entertainment tax. Why are they keeping it? Why are these casinos being able to keep millions of dollars and not give it back to programs that you want to do, and programs that I support from the legislature? Better schools. What about free mental health checks for veterans? Helping veterans when they leave the military. There's, like you say, there's money there. So what, in your view, when you become governor, what would you do to pursue the legislature to get this done?
Well, I think what is so exciting about this is that the governor is the leader of the state and the leader of the Democratic Party as well for the state. And speaking to legislators, they will tell you they know that the system is messed up. There are many legislators who wish that they could do more progressive policies without consequences. They're very scared about getting reelected or being primaried, or, I mean, we've even seen Democrats against the film tax credits being primaried by our own party, which is totally fine, and we should absolutely have those discussions as a party. But I think that people have been too scared to bring this real change to our state. And that's why I'm running on revenues, because I think it's the best policy to be honest to community members and tell them what's actually happening. The state is broke, our local communities are broke, our school districts are broke. Are we okay with that? If we're not okay with that, we have to vote in people who are gonna bring change and who are actually talking about increasing revenues, which I have seen some people running for assembly do that on their own brochures or in interviews. And so it's kind of heartening and exciting to see that people are taking hold of this message and really understanding how important it is. But also the governor not only is building relationships, and certainly when elected, I want to build that coalition of legislators, but also bringing in an industry, bringing them to the table and saying, we gotta bring change. Not one industry is going to fix our problem. We have to fully modernize our entire tax system. And how do you want to come to the table and bring your options? Because we saw that mining taxed themselves in 2019 when we were in desperate need of increasing teacher pay. So we've seen it done before. It's just whether or not there's leadership that pushes that agenda. And the first budget that is passed by the legislature is the education budget. And we better fully fund education. It's going to be a priority of mine, so until you can bring me revenues, I don't want to sign any bills. And we can continue going into special session. So I think it's both, building relationships, and I love doing that as part of governing, but it's also making it clear that the people demanded this and we need to bring change. And what makes me so excited about running in the general is that I can really talk to nonpartisans about what this administration will do to make their lives better instead of just talking about fighting Trump, which we should, but also the specifics of how we're going to invest in you, how we're going to actually make your life easier, make transportation less expensive, make it so you can afford childcare, make it so you can afford housing, make it so you can afford your health care and that you can find a doctor. And I think that that is the winning strategy that we're seeing across the country. And so I'm really optimistic about working with the legislature to get this work done. There's so much to do. I mean, people will go on my website and say, oh my gosh, you have so many plans and proposals. How are you going to get it all done? That's a great problem to have. I have a robust agenda. I want to get things done. And I think you should actually have elected officials who are coming to the table with ideas and specifics, because we're not electing you to be out there for photo ops. We're electing you to get some work done for us. So that's the plan, but I want to work with you on it. Let's talk it through when you also get elected.
Hello. Back to the data centers. What I don't understand is why it seems like we're bending over backwards to push for data centers, as if we have like some kind of an urgency to solve. And for me, I have a real concern about these data centers when it comes to AI and surveillance. And I know that there are good uses for AI, and we can talk about those, and I think those should be talked about as well. But the surveillance is a major problem that we have all across the country. And there's a huge push. I think I read somewhere we have like 5,400 data centers already in the United States, which is like, I don't know, it's so much higher than what they have in other countries. And they're pushing and pushing, and why is that? And they've got the flock cameras, which is another issue that has to be talked about. So that's my biggest concern with the data centers. I think it's great we take away the abatements, all these things, but we have to worry about the other side. Why are we even pushing for this? That has to be looked at and understood, because we are for sure on the precipice of being surveyed all the time. It's already happening. So I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And then also, I guess I wonder, why are we even doing this in the desert at all? Why are we, figuring out all these things with Sierra Club, which is wonderful, they're here, and people's ideas about saving water and energy and how to do it efficiently, but we're in a desert. We've been in a drought. I've lived here since 1996, and I worked at SNUA for 8 years, and all we were doing was, trying to figure out how to stop the water usage, right? So I don't understand why that's even okay. This is kind of long, so I guess maybe I'll leave it at those two things. But I think when we talk about diversification, is talking more about why aren't we putting more solar in, wind, all these things that are better for the environment, better for the people. So I think those things need to be brought to the table, at town halls. And one last thing, which I mentioned earlier, was the evaporative cooling that they don't want to do anymore, but they want to keep it without the evaporation. I forget the term, air cooling or whatever it is. It just pushes the water use further downstream, and I can send you that article that I was mentioning to you, because it just seems like, I don't even know why they've allowed that, and it seems really wrong. So I guess the question is really for you, why are we bending over backwards for them, as if we're solving some emergency, and to what is your thought on AI surveillance in our town?
Well, I think that bending over backwards for data centers has just been the status quo in Nevada since, the advent of needing to store a ton of data. And I think that we just want to best equip communities to make the best decisions and prohibit the major impacts. Reno just did a moratorium. They've got it for a year now on data centers while they work out the regulations, which we're working on as a region. This is the worry, though. If there's no cover on the state level to require these things and say it's in state law, then these data centers will continue to happen. And so I think that it's making sure you put in the proper requirements. So if this is a use you want, then it is at least done correctly. We have in Nevada some of the loosest land use laws in the country. And in some ways that's great because we're libertarians and we're like, don't tell me what to do with my property. And I hear that. Like, I'm not in an HOA for a reason because I'm like, how dare you tell me what to do? But I think also giving local jurisdictions and governments better guidelines and support to make local decisions, I think that is the role of the state. And right now, you could, if you don't have if you don't have a really good argument as to why these things don't make land use findings, which is what we do in the state of Nevada, then these developers can come and sue your local community and bankrupt them. And that's essentially what happens if they don't get what they want. It's a terrible situation. And so it's not just data centers, it's also land use. It's the Badlands. I don't know if folks were paying attention to what happened in this community and how the city and now the county are fighting over whether they should have taken the property tax from the developer while this fight was happening. And now it's looking like the county, who is barely able to take care of foster kids, by the way, is going to have to potentially give back property tax to a developer and subsidize a development that the city of Las Vegas never wanted. And that's because a judge ruled in favor of the developer and because of our land use laws. And why those need to change, that excites me too, because I think there's real potential to make change for land use and zoning. On surveillance, it is so concerning, especially because in Clark County, you have 287G agreement that has been signed with ICE. So that surveillance is being used with the federal government to terrorize local communities, disappear local communities, and that is unacceptable. I will say there needs to be a balance between what we allow local governments to give away as far as your data and what that looks like. And the state could regulate that as well. And also see how the state could make our communities safer to, for example, I think that in some ways, lawmakers are thinking, I like these cameras because over 500 kids got hit walking to school this year alone in Clark County, period. That is astronomical and unacceptable. And this is kids walking or riding their scooters or whatever the case is, their e-bikes to school. We should be protecting these kids. And in some ways, having government knowing who these people are and that you know if you're in a school zone that potentially you could get a ticket, there may be some good policy discussion to have on that. And if anyone listens to the City Cast podcast, they just had a really good discussion about this. But I think that we could absolutely on the state level have better laws to protect your information. And sadly, I just read the chapter of These Truths, which is the history of America, and they talked about the deal that was signed with Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton to fully deregulate the internet. We've given away a lot of information already. We've essentially allowed the internet to rule our lives because it's fully deregulated. And that's a federal level issue, but I think that there's real potential to protect Nevadans on the state level as well, which is where a lot of my AI and automation policies come in, because we need to protect jobs, protect people's privacy, ensure that there's non-discrimination of hiring, which AI is doing. It's all AI driven. So there's a lot of modernization that our state needs to do, and that's just one tiny piece, but I hear you on that.
Chris, can you speak a little bit more about the evaporative cooling question and sort of what the main difference is and what the alternatives are? Sorry, former journalist, can't stop myself, but from a follow-up. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, or in general, as data centers become kind of like more of a hot button issue, are there things that you feel like are kind of getting lost in the politics of it that people need to understand about either the engineering side or the science?
Sure. How much time do you have? So it's a very
We're missing trivia night for this, so I wanted to
I
thank you for
found
that,
out.
but also try to ask you some trivia.
Right, thank you. And I just found out from one of my friends, trivia night was canceled because of the Golden Knights game.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
all right.
we're not missing anything.
There you go.
Anyway, just a little bit of background. So evaporative cooling is basically when you use water and air passing over it, right? That lowers the temperature. Like evaporative coolers are called swamp coolers that are on the roofs of most older houses in this community, right? You drive around and they use a huge amount of water, right? Which is the problem. Back, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when, remember in 1989, I think it was, they opened up the chutes and let water out of Lake Mead because it was going to overflow, right? Boy, that would be nice now. But that's a big problem because it uses, billions of gallons of water a year go up into the air, right? Virtually every other kind of cooling that gets used when you use like what they call a fluid cooler. Or if you go by any of the big casinos, some of them, if you go around the back of like the Westgate and others that I used to do some consulting for, see these big, huge things with a big, massive fan on the top, right? And you see water dribbling through that. That's called a cooling tower. And that uses evaporative cooling. It's like a really big version of what people have in their houses with a little media that goes down. This has, hundreds of square feet of that media, and even more water gets used, and a lot of energy to push the fan around, to pull the air through it. So it's very effective in a desert environment. It reduces the temperature by 20 degrees, right? But using hardly any energy. So from an energy perspective, it's a great deal. Now, when SNWA basically put that moratorium on all new evaporative cooling, they were forcing both residents and businesses and schools and everybody else to, if they had to replace, say, most homes have like a 2-ton or a 3-ton or a 4-ton air conditioning unit, right? Most buildings like this, it's probably like a 10-ton unit. They have these like rooftop package units. Once you get above that, right, you can have a central station, a big chiller they call it, that creates a lot of hot water using the same refrigeration effect that you have in your one at home. But the energy it takes to create the same amount of cooling using that, the direct expansion, or DX it's called, or even heat pumps, it's the same thing. That uses 3 to 5 to sometimes 7 times more energy to give you that same 20-degree reduction, right? When it's 95 outside, you want it to be 75 inside, right? So you think about that, where the amount of energy it takes to get developed at, we still have more than half the power in this state comes from natural gas. A chunk of it comes from geothermal, and I think we're up 15, maybe 20% on certain days of solar and a tiny, tiny bit of wind, and a little bit of hydro. Right? We have a little bit from the dam. Most people don't know this. Most of that goes to LA and Phoenix. We get a tiny smidgen. But so by SNWA requiring that you go to regular cooling, they, inadvertently are increasing electric loads by huge amounts, right? Which uses more electricity, which uses more water, right? Again, a lot of people don't know this. Any power plant that runs on natural gas or coal or fossil fuels of any sort uses a huge amount of water. You have those big cooling tanks you'll see outside every nuclear plant. They're famous for the big sort of upside down mushroom, looks like, or the big, huge, old, straight smokestacks. That's tons, like billions of gallons of water a year going up. So there's no easy solution to it, but there's a lot of options now with air-cooled heat pumps, or to the point where 30 years ago, you couldn't use a heat pump here, and it wouldn't work very well, because when the outdoor air gets so hot, you can't reject heat into it, right? But now they're so efficient, they actually work, right? And again, it's unfortunate that the tax credits are taken away for that, because it really started to make a big difference in this country, right? And at the end of the day, no matter what you do from a cooling perspective, you should try really hard to power it with renewable energy, right? And that's one of the things I'm trying to get going around here. Another group I'm a part of is, let's get the electric utility, gas, the water utility all together rowing in the boat in the same direction, so you're not forcing people to buy these units that are way more expensive and cost more. So if you're going to put in that newer kind of air conditioning system, seal your windows, put sweeps under your doors, put in all LED lights, put in a programmable Nest thermostat or something like that in your home, so you reduce your use by 30%, because it's going to go up. You should turn that air conditioning unit and go through one summer here, your bills are gonna be triple what they were, you know? So, again, I don't wanna take up too much time.
Oh,
That's
that's
the difference
helpful.
between
Thank
evaporative
you.
cooling and water cooling.
Thank you. I just figured we'd use this opportunity to make sure we were all talking about the same thing, myself included.
And one other thing, it's a big issue most people don't know about. So another part of this, when S&W introduced this rule, they said we're going to do this turf removal program. Everyone's heard about this at this point, right? It started at $1 a square foot to take out your grass lawn. Now it's up to $7 a square foot or something like that, right? Which, in general idea, yes, I think it's great. We live in the desert, right? Like the young lady there said, you know, and we have lawns like you're in Chicago or New York, right? It's ridiculous. But what they didn't realize is by taking all that grass out and not redesigning the irrigation system, it's killed over 100,000 trees, probably a lot more than that, right? And a lot of the people I know from the Sierra Club, they're absolutely going bananas over this because that is increasing the heating effect here, right? So it wasn't really well thought through, and nobody, because SNWA can kind of do what they like. They're a quasi sort of governmental organization. They don't have to go through what utilities have to go through and what other city governments have to go through. So I think it's important that we think these things through and get a lot more public input on them before we just make a huge decision.
Okay, more questions?
Good evening, Governor. Good to see you. And really appreciate your energy and especially your honesty, your vision. There's so much filth and disease in politics, you know, and it needs to be cleaned up. But I've traveled thousands of miles on the roads of Nevada. I love the state. I've made two observations. First, if you travel, sometimes there's like 100 miles between rest stops, gas stations, and I'm wondering if we could have like a Beautify Nevada program where there's well-lit rest stops and stuff, similar to what Utah has. You know, you pull in someplace in the middle of the night out there in Nevada and it's really creepy. But the second observation I made is there's hundreds of thousands of square miles of vacant land. And in lieu of bringing in more data centers, do you have a vision for what kind of industry you would want to bring into Nevada?
I love the rest stop idea, and actually this has been incorporated into my Nevada Works program, which would be part of those $15,000 or 15,000 jobs that we bring into the state, because we can get more good paying union jobs, both by private contractors and through governmental hiring, to actually invest in our state. And one of those is rest stops. And we did a rural tour earlier in the campaign, and I go out to Ely, Nevada a lot because that's where my dad grew up. And you are absolutely right. All of our, what did you call them? I just forgot the name of them. Rest stops. Yeah, they're scary. They're scary. If they have lighting, then they're full of weeds and the bathrooms don't work and they may be closed and you're just like in a parking lot. And this is because NDOT runs all of our rest stops in the state, and they are the size. Our Nevada Department of Transportation is actually smaller than Hawaii's Department of Transportation, because we rely solely on the surface transportation grants that we receive from the federal government, instead of having local support of our Department of Transportation. And they've talked about how they need to modernize that tax system. One of them being, if you see Amazon vehicles driving around in your neighborhood, that's not, and you see that they're EVs, it's not because Jeff Bezos loves EVs in the environment, it's because he doesn't have to pay gas taxes with those vehicles. Also, we're lucky if they're even registered in the state of Nevada. They're not even paying what we pay to register their vehicle in the state to do these deliveries. And so it's figuring out ways that we can also increase revenues by corporate entities who are using our roads for business, who are not paying their fair share, and investing in those good paying jobs, which also are create safety in our states. You can safely travel. And what if we had EV charging in some of those? What a concept. So we really did, I mean, it's wild what has happened with the Trump administration, because when Governor Sandoval was our governor several governors ago, he saw the vision of clean energy for the state. And he was all about it. He wanted Nevada to be fully electric on all of our highways. And I think there was a vision and a plan to get there. Of course, there was just no money. And that's just the Nevada way. We love to put together the plans and then not fund things, or do a pilot project and fund 2 things and then we run out of money. So yes, I think that there's real opportunity to see how we can invest in all sorts of things. Our parks, our trails, our government buildings, all the things that are falling apart, our schools, and get those building and construction trade jobs going again in our state and get people back to work. And then on what is the vision for the next economy in Nevada, we could bring and invest in the aerospace industry in the state, and certainly in Southern Nevada. I think that there's real potential for that because of the history that we've had with aerospace in the state. It's just investing in it and showing these companies that also Nevada has a good education system, and Nevada is a place where you can buy a house and you can actually get a doctor here. It's like, we think that we can do all of these tax incentives to bring in businesses, but the really good businesses don't want to go to a place that's 48th in per pupil funding. And so I think that that's where it's like, if we could get enough revenues online to build the internal Nevada economy of investing in ourselves, then we reap the secondary benefit of actually bringing in good industries, good paying jobs, people who pay a living wage, and that benefits the whole state. I think that there's real potential to see if we can use science to support different ag practices. That's part of the reason that the Colorado is so over allocated, is because of ag and this flood irrigation that's permitted in all different states. And we are at the end of the line, and that's why we're having such problems with our allocation. And so I think that really seeing how we could build up that industry, I think that we could have a medical tourism industry in Nevada as well, which would also benefit Nevadans who live here, who need medical care. Come to Vegas and have your hysterectomy. I don't know. So I think that there's real potential to invest in new industries that also help Nevadans, and talk to folks who want to bring good paying jobs here instead of subsidizing their employees' health care, which is what we're doing with these folks who I feel like are taking advantage of states and communities all across the country. And I'm just sick of getting the scraps. That's what I hear all the time is, well, what will happen? Will they leave? I'm like, where do you think mining's gonna go? We have the largest lithium deposits in the country. So where are they gonna go? Same thing with gaming. The investments that have been made on the Strip and in all sorts of parts of our state, that there's no way they're walking away from that. This is an important industry that wants to be at the table, and just making sure that everyone's paying their fair share is going to be the way that we get there. But I can't wait to hear what other people's thoughts are on economic development. So it's an exciting topic, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Hi, Alexis. When Senator Neal was in government,
Yes.
God rest his soul,
Yeah.
he did everything he could to get the casinos to get the taxes raised on
Yes.
casinos. Who were making, back then they were making all the money.
Yep.
And with all these professional programs and athletes, and they're making hand over fist, they should be raised, the taxes on the casinos should be raised more. But when everybody bucks at it, all the government people, depends on who's in, I guess, they buck at raising taxes on the casinos. So why is that?
Oh, I'll tell you why. Because we did a poll of what people think of gaming, and man, is it not polled well in this state. People are mad at gaming. They not only are they not paying their fair share into the state coffers, but they're not paying their employees adequately. They're not treating their employees well. They're cutting shifts. It's all about the high-end customer now. So now casinos have restructured the business. So let's bring in the customer and extort every dollar that we can so they may not want to come back to Vegas. The whole point of coming to this place is to build that relationship with the customer so they'll come back and continue to spend money here, and cultivating that, you know, where people feel like I kind of got a deal there instead of every, you know, parking, they're extracting money. Food, they used to take a loss on food and beverage, so they bring people in the door. Not anymore. There is no part of the business where they are supporting the customer either. So I think that there's real potential to raise taxes on the casinos. Those in elected office like to say that it's too hard because it takes a 2/3 majority from the legislature to do that. But if you are in a desperate economic state, which I believe Nevada is in and heading even, I mean, I've seen several recessions, sadly, living here my whole life, and I feel like we're heading there again. We have got to ask them to come to the table willingly, because I think that they will, because that's why mining came, because they knew they were going to potentially be taxed more. But also, we can change the Constitution with the vote of the people. You need to get signatures, and you need to bring it to the vote of the people twice. Do you think that Nevadans are going to balk at increasing taxes on gaming? I don't see it. So I think it's also using the political will. So if the legislature can't get it done, which I think, again, I'm very optimistic. I think the cool thing about governing is that it's relationship based, and it's finding out what each person in the seat wants and how you can work together to get there. But if they don't want to do it, then let's get some signatures and bring it to a vote of the people. I think that gaming would actually more willing, if we did that, come to the table and say, tax us at this point, because at least they'd control it. And we know they'd pay double the taxes in several other states, the same companies who are operating here. And so I'm sick of the excuses from elected officials, to be perfectly honest, that they can't do it. Because I'm like, well, why are you there? Like, we are bleeding money right now as a state, and our public infrastructure is a mess. You gotta be doing something for us while you're there. And I think that that's another thing that we need to look at is our legislature meets every 2 years for 120 days. How much work are they getting done for us? They're only meeting so infrequently. I feel like the point of the legislature is to meet and hear the concerns of your school district, your counties, your citizens. Make those laws, change those laws. But right now, it feels like every time the legislature meets, it's how can we give a deal away to the Strip? There's always a deal, right? That's how I feel like every time that they meet. And how do we make it harder to make sure that working people get by? I feel like any housing opportunity to support people and keeping them housed, those bills, they die in committee. They're not even getting out of committee. So we've got to ask more from our elected officials to do better for us. And that's why I'm running, because I think we need a vision for people to see, okay, we can do this. There's a map for us. We can actually bring change to the state.
Hello, hello. Lovely to see you. Thank you for having us. My name is Virginia Schreiner, for everyone if I haven't met you before. I'm a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. I'm also an entertainer. I work in the casinos, but I work freelance in the casinos. This is a response to both Eva and your question, and then I have a question as well for you, Chris, after this. Something that I want everyone to know is about the live entertainment tax that goes along with this. So all live theater, anyone over 200 seats pays a 9% tax. That's music, that's concerts, anything as long as it's not a nonprofit. So Cirque du Soleil, Awakening, shows like that. But everyone exempt from it is sports, as long as the sports exist 2 times a year. So we're at a really cute moment right now, though, where all these people who are funded, and it's important to know that the majority of your legislature are funded by Nevada Resorts Association, so they are working in favor of the casinos, not you. They're also funded by sports executives, so they're not working in favor of you, they're working in favor of the sports. Those are really important to know when it comes to legislation making, and this is why our sports are exempt from the live entertainment tax, despite the fact that they do pay they make 50 to 200 times more in revenue than any theater. Now, meanwhile, while gaming is going down, we're having a job crisis, which they've already mentioned today. The number of unemployment is significantly higher than anything you've read because it's not counting contract workers, it is not counting people who have been demoted but still have 1 hour of work a week, and it is not counting people who have been pushed to on-call. We are having a crisis in Southern Nevada with jobs that is going to crumble everything. But the beauty of that is people like Alexis and me, and up and down your ballot in all categories, there are people not taking funding for the first time ever in an election. So we are actually going to be able to push this legislation to ensure that sports have to pay the 9% tax. And it has become such a public talking point. It is all over social media to the point that these legislators, they will be burned if they do not vote for this. And so this is a really good time. The fact that we're at a crisis, and I know it, like I have lost the majority of my income. 14 shows have closed in 2 years, and all the clubs and restaurants are closing or going non-union, and they've let go of all their entertainment. Now, what we have to remember that is casinos run entertainment here, not entertainment producers. And so we are the first to go. Meanwhile, we've also lost our jobs in public education because arts is the first to go as that got cut. We've also lost our job in nonprofit because National Endowment of the Arts got cut. So this is a good year, though, to answer Eva's question and to circle back to you, why Alexis is such a bomb person to vote for, because she is the only candidate that is not taking money from the sports, from the casino executives, from Nevada Resorts Association. And a lot of us have been like, how do we get them taxed? That's how, guys. I'm telling you, follow the money. It's why it's the biggest talking point in 2026 elections. You cannot get your elected official to work in your favor if they are financed by the people that you want to tax. Yes. Okay, that's my thought there. If you have any entertainment questions, let me know. But Team Alexis, my follow-up question for you, Chris, is, well, first a suggestion. This isn't as related to environmental concerns with AI and data centers, but for whoever, and I know we have some other candidates in the room, something that just our communities would greatly beg for, can we please also put some likeness and image regulations with AI? We've been fighting this in our industry for a decade. This is not new to us. We just got a win with Screen Actors Guild that they are not going to be able to use our image. However, in the state of Nevada, because we don't have much of a media establishment, we're mostly non-union here. And this is also a huge thing in the casinos. They use our images for free, they do not pay us, and they have lifetime perpetuity. So with AI, again, I know it's not necessarily related to Sierra Club. We would love if we could add some of that. My follow-up question for you is, I was taking notes earlier. So I've been touring the whole state, going to Ely, and which I was calling Eli, I apologize for a long time, and Loveland and all over. It is actually both sides of the aisle, Republicans, doesn't matter, everyone has the same concerns. It's not quite the same fear that we had with the Y2K issues. It is fear of what already exists, right? We're not fearful of the unknown, we're fearful of what we've already seen on social media when it comes to unclean drinking water, which you addressed and all that. I think the last I looked at it, we have 63 operational data centers, 80-something currently in construction, could have changed a couple weeks ago. We're the fastest growing in the nation, but not the largest. Of all of those, I've only heard of one that is providing their own energy right now. I don't even know if that's true. I tried to find information for it online and couldn't. How many of the regulations that you were suggesting, how many of these data centers already exist that are 100% regulated and like self-sufficient with power and not taking any water?
0.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought, but you know, they do hide the information really well. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
And on image and likeness, that's also in the AI plan. Yes, it's a crisis and so scary and so wrong what the casinos are doing to live entertainers. I mean, there were, at the same party we were at recently, Chippendales who tried to unionize, and the guys who were trying to unionize got fired. So, I mean, we don't have an environment where performers or folks who are not currently in a union have the support that they need from the state. And that's honestly the AG's office job to also support. And we're seeing that even prostitution is they're looking at finding a way to form a union, because everyone's saying if you're a contract worker, you can't do it, but they're gonna find a workaround. So we need to make sure that we're also supporting entertainers and making sure that you are making a living wage. It's heartbreaking what's happening, because what you do is of value to this state. We need you here. You make up the coolness factor in Nevada. My God, you know, what would we do without Bridget?
Hi, yes. I heard you say that the state needs additional and I think more consistent revenue, and that diversifying industry is part of that. But diversifying industry sometimes means additional industry, which means more resources. Data centers are an extreme example of that, right? They need a lot more resources. But are there any thoughts or support being put towards increasing the rate of collection of those resources as a state, specifically energy and water, at a rate that can support additional industry growth to try and get ahead of it? For instance, is there any support for mega projects for solar or terraforming for rainwater collection to try and increase those resources within the state?
I mean, I'll have Chris start it and then I'll round it out.
So in a small section of the state of Nevada, you could put in enough solar to power the whole United States, right? And that's like, not like half the state, like a small section of the state. But like many things, power is a local issue, right? So utilities in this country are regulated on a state-by-state basis, like most other things are in the US. Most other countries around the world, it's not, right? One of the reasons we don't have solar everywhere, and I cringe every time I fly into Las Vegas, same with Phoenix, you hardly see a solar panel. You're starting to see more and more on houses now, but it's still 2%, 3%, it's a tiny number. Australia, Spain, and Germany all basically created a national permitting law for solar, right? Because, solar panels have come down, right? It's 25% of what it was 7, 8 years ago. Batteries are following the same thing, even faster, right? And they should be looked at together. You should never just put solar in. First, make your buildings efficient, solar and a battery at the same time, right? Because when things really get bad one day, you're going to want that battery, believe me. The second thing is, if we could, I mentioned that, so these 3 countries did this. It took out what they call the balance of cost. Those panels and the equipment went from being, it used to be 50% of the cost to like 8 or 10% of the cost, maybe 20% of the cost. And all these other costs were, the permitting, the insurance, all this other stuff, that got cut in half. So in these countries where they're paying almost double what we pay for utilities in Europe and other places, they pay half of what their friends next door do, right? Because they put solar, right? And it's a huge difference. And you can do that in your home here. You pay 14 cents a kilowatt hour to NV Energy. You can produce the power. You get a lease. You finance it yourself. Don't take a PPA. They're a bad deal. And you can basically produce it for 3 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So that's a fantastic idea. And again, if we could have a governor who'd be behind this, and we had a governor's office of energy who actually did something, it would make a huge difference in jobs as well. Here, every electrician in the state would have work for 15 years. We'd have people coming from out of state just to do rooftop, and you could also do a lot of solar canopies in parking lots. Think about the amount of parking lots we have here in some of these old malls that are quarter full now. You could produce a huge amount of energy. All the empty lots that are never going to be infilled, right? Because developers don't make enough money to fill in these huge blocks we have in the middle of town. You could just cover those with solar, right? And because all the electrical infrastructure to receive it is already there, it wouldn't be a huge deal. That's why all the solar plants are going in Boulder City, because the transmission infrastructure is there already, right? So, I forgot the second part of your question.
The second one, are there any mega projects, are there any support for mega projects for additional rainwater collection, additional reservoirs, maximizing the amount of water we do get in this state, just to shore up that resource?
Not that I know of, because we don't get much
I know.
in this state, right? In California, right, they're just starting this now. It's only the beginning, but doing moisture harvesting with these screens that you put up at night along the coast, right? And they've been doing this in the Middle East and Israel and other places for years, right? It's been well known for a long time. And so it's basically mimicking nature, right? Like with cactus and Troyas and all that, they do this already. but we don't get enough moisture here. It's just like we don't have wind power here because there's not enough wind resources here consistently to do that, right? I think there's like 2 or 3 small wind arrays here in the state. But we have the best solar resource in the world, hands down.
Thank you.
And NV Energy, I will just say, doesn't love rooftop solar because they can't control it as much, but we can make it clear that they need to support it. And that's where, rewarding people to invest in it and requiring it is another important step. Sorry, Sheena.
No, it's okay. You've been such a smart, thoughtful, and attentive crowd about such a serious subject. We're going to take one more question, then give folks a quick chance to wrap up so that anyone who hasn't had a chance to meet Alexis in person, come say hi, and we'll be out of here on time. But go ahead and ask us the last question. One more.
Thank you very much for Governor having here. I hope you do more town meetings in the future, like the one previous before you, who was, her name was Angela Merkel. You know who that one was?
Angela Merkel?
Yes.
From Germany? Yeah.
4th term consecutive elected. She has a doctoral degree in nuclear physics, and she's one of the best. Anyway, my background is nuclear physics, and I came here for a reactor mountain project. We shut it down. And I have a master in electromechanical. I've done a lot of power background. I used to be transport design engineer, so I know a little bit about what you guys are talking about. But here's the deal. Why are we bending back over to casinos?
Yeah.
We should. Why we keep saying that we are a poor state? We are not. We are not even a silver state. We have more gold in this state than California. Why we call ourselves golden state opposed to silver state? We have money. We have the resources. We have the rare earth situation going on not too far from it. So we have those. We have brain to work it, but for some reason we're not working it. What we're going to do for job situation, and that has not been said yet. We should not have even allowed data centers come down here for number one reason alone. That is called Fourth Amendment. Improper search and seizure. Why are they spying on us? FBI has been doing a good job as it is now. We don't need additional. Why are they selling our data? They shouldn't, because we're letting them to do that. So you stop doing that, bring more industry here, medical industry, such as Da Vinci men, the ones that are doing it, surgical with the robotic. We could bring those industry here. We could do, we have a solar panel that works at nighttime. Did you know that?
I couldn't hear you.
We have a solar panel that works at nighttime.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
University of Stanford did that research, and MIT, 4 years ago.
Wow.
So we can have wind power. Why? We could provide the solar energy from even at nighttime when there's no wind. We provide that. If the wind will go, there's your energy. So we could do that for some reason. I could provide for 48 states here, including getting a geothermal for the Death Valley 136 temperature. We go during winter months, dig all the ground, put the pipe in there, get the, the heat out, and transfer that to the electrical. We could do this, but we're not doing any of this. Instead, you're catering to data centers. Why?
Well, it's so funny. I have been thinking a lot about this and talking about it with the campaign team and community members and my husband a lot about how much companies pay local officials and state officials and federal officials when they're running for office so they don't get regulated. I mean, I love how elected officials like to talk about how big their war chests are, but really what they're saying is in many cases, my campaign is solely funded by individual donors and real people in the state. But in many ways, that they're saying, I'm willing to potentially bend or yield to this business interest. And the political science they've studied campaign donations, and they say that you can't necessarily, your vote isn't necessarily bought, and I think that's fair to say that, but influence is bought. And if you are allowed to give, like the way that we do campaign finance in this state, and I should put finance in quotes because it's not, or finance regulations in quotes because it's not really regulation, is you can bundle, many different people in your life can bundle donations. So your spouse can give 10 grand, you can give 10 grand, your LLC, your trust, and then your company. And then you can give as much money as you want to a PAC. And a lot of that money is dark money. And so both candidates running for governor right now are playing that same game. And it's because it is hard to connect with voters the traditional way, which is what we're doing, which is town halls, meeting you where you're at, asking you to come out and talk to me, ask me the hard questions. But it's, honestly, we have got to reform the way that campaigns are paid for in this state. And certainly it would be wonderful if Congress could tackle this as well, but they don't seem to be doing much of anything these days. So I think that we need a governor who actually wants to regulate the way that donations come in and make sure that it's more transparent for the voter, and also that you can't give as much money, because one single mining company gave our governor over $1 million through his PACs and through his campaign. All legal, by the way. But we wonder why the state water engineer was fired for trying to regulate mining recently, and as a legacy user of water in our state. And it's because if you feel like you got elected because of this special interest, when they call you up and tell you that they're feeling chafed or uncomfortable by a regulator, you get rid of them. And that's where Lombardo is so much like Trump, because it's like getting rid of career, dedicated public servants who are following the law in the state. And this is happening all over in different parts of state government right now, and why we need an ethical government who also understands the job of the state is not just to allow big business to thrive. The job of the state is actually to regulate big business and to make it so working families are successful in your state. So that's why I would say you're seeing that there's a movement and more progress on these issues. It's because money talks. And I think that what we are seeing, and this is what excites me, is this is a movement in our country of candidates who are standing up to special interests, to big moneyed interests, and saying no, and saying, I'm here to work for families, for Nevadans. I'm here to improve this community and actually do the hard work of governing and trying to get things done for people. And that's why I'm quite optimistic about this election, because if there ever was a time to elect a grassroots candidate for governor, this is it. People are pissed at the party, they're mad at the state, they want to see change, and we've been doing that. I've been out here, campaigning since September, 9 months, connecting with people on the issues, and I think we're making an impact, and I think we're going to really surprise people on election day, because we have friends of friends, who are telling friends to vote for me. We are connecting with people on the door, on the phone, at these town halls, and on social media, and really motivating people to switch their party, become a Democrat for a day, even if they can't stand Democrats, just to vote for us. Just to vote for change. And so I'm really excited about what this election could mean, and the only way that we can actually bring change to the state is to get people excited, to get them motivated to show up, because we are losing, especially in Clark County, people who are engaged in showing up for elections. The reason Trump won the state is because Clark County didn't show up. And then if they did show up, they were ready for change, our president was selling something that we obviously know he couldn't deliver on, and people are regretting those votes, but they were desperate because their economic situation made them want to make that choice, and racism, I think obviously that played a role. But I think that we really need to, the only way we're going to beat Joe Lombardo and bring change to the state is if we engage with people and let them know how we're going to make their lives better. And that's what this campaign's all about, and why I'm doing this, because I'm sick and tired, just like you are, and let's go fight for some change in Nevada.
Okay, I think that's going to be officially tough to beat. So let's stop there. If you didn't get a chance to ask Alexis your question, feel free to come up and help us put the chairs away. Thank you again to Jason and the Teamsters for hosting this. We appreciate it. You can read more of Alexis's plan and policies around data center, as well as around AI and automation, something that came up a lot, and her economic development plan more broadly on her website at alexisfornevada.com. If you're not following us on social, please do. It's Alexis for Nevada everywhere except for X, because we don't acknowledge that. And we have a bunch more events in Vegas this week if you want to come out, including a karaoke fundraiser on Saturday. You may not know this, but not only is she the smart, but she can really sing. So it's we've done very few fundraisers like this. We are not a fundraiser first, town hall second kind of campaign. We are the opposite, but we are trying to pay the bills. And in this case, it's a low cost overall. And if you, I think it's, what's the total? Is it 50? If you want to enter to win the chance to